Jimmie Rivera versus Pedro Munhoz, and this is a rematch of a fight that happened several years ago now. I want to confirm actually exactly when that fight had taken place. That was in November of 2015, and that was the second fight in the UFC for one Jimmie Rivera. And in terms of odds, we got roughly around minus 140 for Jimmie Rivera and plus 120 on Pedro Munhoz. So if you guys remember that first fight, it did go Jimmie Rivera's way. For some reason, it was a split decision, but it seemed like it should have been a unanimous all around. Jimmie Rivera pretty much won every single round. I didn't see how much damage Pedro Munhoz truly put out there. He did hit him and hurt him a couple of times, but I feel like the majority of work that Jimmie Rivera did in that fight was much more than we saw from Pedro Munhoz. We did see Jimmie start to slow down slightly in that third round, but he still was able to do enough, in my opinion, to win that round. But since that fight, we've seen him put together a better game. His cardio has definitely improved, and we see him able to go out there and fight for a full 15 minutes without showing as much of a compromised gas tank as we saw from him in that first fight. Now in his last 5 fights, he's gone 2-3, but those losses, not the worst in the world. He gets head kicked by Marlon Moraes 33 seconds into the fight. I'm gonna chalk that up to just absolute shit luck in terms of that's the only time we've seen him finished via strikes. Usually he's a quite durable individual. Then he goes out there and loses to Aljamain Sterling via decision. And that was a very weird fight where we saw Aljo right off the bat just start shooting for takedowns. He went 0 for 7 on takedowns, but he did manage to accrue a decent amount of control time. And in that amount of time, he really seemed to just disrupt the timing and the game of Jimmie Rivera in that fight. And we saw him kind of just go out there and stay within kicking range, land a bunch of kicks from distance, get a couple of shots off in terms of strikes as well too. But overall, it was just a very frustrating matchup for him, and you could see it especially when he goes back to his corners and verbalizes that to his corner and his coaches. He's just like I feel off today. I'm not on my game. Blah blah blah. And I think it's not just because of him being off of his game, but it was due to Aljamain Sterling going in there and just disrupting his flow and the type of fight that Jimmie Rivera normally brings to the table. So great work on Aljamain Sterling's part to go out there and actually give that type of fight and disrupt a game of Jimmie Rivera, who is known to be a pretty reliable fighter who can go out there and get his strikes off no matter what's happening in that fight. But yeah, that was a very tough one for him. Then the Petr Yan fight. I think that's a fight that a lot of people need to go back and watch because that was a much closer fight than history seems to perceive it as. Like that first round, pretty much winning that entire first round up until getting dropped at the end with like 15 seconds left. So he gives up that round. I get it, a knockdown. The second round, I'd say a little bit stronger of a round for Petr Yan, but still very close round up until the point that Petr Yan knocks him down again right at the ending of the run. And that third round, I thought Jimmie Rivera did enough to actually get the judge's nod there, at least for that third round. But yeah, that was a very close fight. Probably the closest fight we've seen bantamweight champion Petr Yan in up until this point in his UFC career. So I still think that Jimmie has it, and that was only 2 fights ago. We're talking about June of 2019, so over a year and a half ago at this point. But I truly think that he's still one of the higher level guys at this weight class. Then he goes out there and he beats Cody Stamann in July. And that was somewhat of a weird fight in terms of being short notice. This fight happening at 145 pounds, and Cody Stamann, coming off a quick win over, not a quick win, but a pretty decisive win over Brian Kelleher right before that. And he just jumped right back into the cage and got his game going again. But some people want to call that fight a close fight. That was a clean 30-27. The only reason it seemed close is because Cody Stamann's out there just dry humping him up against the cage, not able to get him down. I think he completed 1 takedown. I do want to confirm that number though, but he made it close just because he was clinching onto him the entire time. Okay, Cody Stamann completed 1 takedown out of 5 attempts. So he went 20% on that one. Jimmie Rivera actually completed 2 takedowns of his own, but still landed a total of 90 strikes compared to the 62 that were coming back his way from Cody Stamann. And Cody Stamann did accrue close to 4.5 minutes of control time, but very, very minimal damage. And during that control time, he's the one getting hit by Jimmie Rivera, who was defending the takedown, but also dishing out damage. So that was a clear 30-27 all around, in my opinion. I think the best moment for Cody Stamann in that fight was when he landed that flying knee. I think it was close to the end of the second round. But yeah, that was a clear fight for Jimmie Rivera where he did enough damage, defended enough, and was able to go out there and get the dub. Now, if people want to compare that fight to what we're going to see with Pedro Munhoz, I think they're going to be sorely mistaken. Like, when have you ever seen Pedro Munhoz, just clinch onto dudes like that and just try to hold them and overpower them? I don't think that's his game plan. That's not what he's like. He's a black belt in jiu-jitsu. His main go-to move is the guillotine, but we don't really see him going out there chasing takedowns. Like, he's one of those... I'm trying to compare. Like, there's always those jiu-jitsu guys that are super high level on the ground, so they just throw caution to the wind when they're on the feet, because they don't mind getting taken down. Because normally, when you go out there and start throwing all these heavy strikes and you force your opponent to, try to get out of that situation, they normally shoot for a takedown, and in doing so, they leave their neck out there. And Pedro Munhoz is a master of snatching up people's necks. How he's going to grab the neck of Jimmie Rivera here, that non-existent neck of Mr. Stocky Jimmie Rivera, I don't think that's going to happen. We saw Pedro Munhoz try to clamp onto it in their first fight, but Jimmie Rivera did a really good job in terms of getting out of those positions, exploding out of those positions. The guy is a little ball of energy, and he has very good Muay Thai skills as well too, which is where I think is going to be the difference maker here. Pedro Munhoz, I like to call him, like, with all due respect, I like to call him the walking punching bag, because he brings that style where he's just marching forward pretty much at all times, trying to throw heat in every single one of his strikes. Tries to change it up every now and then in terms of throwing calf kicks, but that's something that Jimmie Rivera is very privy to. He throws a lot of calf kicks of his own, and he's a Muay Thai specialist, so you don't really see those calf kicks working on guys that actually, are well-versed in that realm. Like, it's going to work against a wrestler, it's going to work against a boxer, but in terms of a Muay Thai and kickboxing guy like Jimmie Rivera, just like we saw when Mark Diakase fought Rafael Fiziev, Fiziev was more than privy to the calf kicks and was able to check them and make it a lot more difficult for Mark Diakase to get his game going. And I expect the same thing here if Pedro Munhoz wants to go out there and try to, really get the leg kick game going or the calf kick game going. I think he's going to get checked. I think he's going to get countered. And I think we're going to see Jimmie Rivera get the better of the striking exchanges, which is what this fight will come down to. I'd be very surprised if we see Pedro Munhoz land a takedown. And I'd be very surprised to see this fight take place on the ground at any point in this fight. I'm expecting Jimmy to go out there, do his Muay Thai thing where he's landing combinations from range, landing some good kicks, and then doing a very good job of pivoting off after he throws his combinations to nullify the amount of damage that is coming back his way. I am very confident in this pick. I really, really like Jimmie Rivera here. Again, the only real knock on his fight and in his game and the possible path to victory for Pedro Munhoz is if he knocks out Jimmie Rivera, just as Marlon Moraes was able to. But I don't think that we'll see that. I think that was more of an anomaly for Jimmie Rivera. Like, he got knocked down twice by Petr Yan, but his senses were all there. Like, Petr Yan is able to put dudes out, but Jimmie Rivera ate them, got dropped, but was still able to come back and continue fighting. And even after getting dropped in those first two rounds, he was able to go out there and have a very good third round against Petr Yan as well too. So, Pedro Munhoz, good fighter, but I think he struggles against guys that technically have a better advantage, are technically better than him on the feet. And I think that Jimmie Rivera is miles ahead of him on the feet, and that's where this fight is mostly going to take place. And I think Jimmie Rivera still has high upside in terms of one day fighting for a title. He's only 31 years old, still getting better, getting in some good experience. Fell a couple times against Moraes and Sterling and Yan, but those are high-level losses. And again, that Petr Yan fight being as close as it was, I truly think that he can make it competitive if they were to fight once again. So I like Jimmie Rivera here. I don't even mind the decision prop, which I currently think is around plus 120. You guys know me. I don't really like overs or playing decision props, but I went over my history of decision prop bets that I've made, and I had Jimmie Rivera over John Dodson 2 units at plus 150 by decision, and thankfully that one came through for me. It might be another approach that I'm looking at here, but I do like the line that we're getting regardless. Like, I believe if I do want to confirm this number, but the implied odds, so let's say like the bookies that I'm using, we can get Jimmie Rivera around minus 138, minus 139, but just for the sake of this podcast, let's say he has a minus 140 is what his line is. The implied odds there are 58% for him to win. Personally, I think the only way for Pedro Munhoz to win this fight is if he knocks out Jimmie Rivera, and I think that's a very low percentage to hit. So I'd put Jimmie Rivera all the way up to even like 70%. I believe he has that good of a chance of winning this fight, which would put him roughly around that minus 230 range. So yeah. I think people might be reading too far into this, which is why Pedro Munhoz should win this fight. But I like Jimmie Rivera pretty much at all points. He's going to go out there. He's going to go out, strike him. And I think he's going to make it look easy too. So I got Jimmie Rivera to win this fight via decision.